All right, well, welcome to a very, very special edition of LiteGear Live. Here on episode 4, we are talking to the Mandalorian team here the week of Star Wars Day, which was this last Monday, and actually the drop of Disney's Gallery Mandalorian documentary. First episode of that aired on Monday as well. So we're very, very happy to be joined by the set lighting team behind Star Wars The Mandalorian. Joining us today is gaffer Jeff Webster, veteran to LiteGear Live rigging gaffer Bobby DeCellis, programmer Derek Hoffman, fixtures foreman Sam Kemp, and a special guest from a CIA black site somewhere here in America, fixtures foreman Phil Abeda. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you.
Hello, Paul.
One of my favorite things to start out talking about is how did you guys all wind up working together? How did you meet? And Jeff, how did you put this amazing creative team together?
Well, I've known Derek the longest. We grew up together, so we kind of started out our career. He was my best boy, and then he kind of moved into programmer position once I realized, and he realized that was kind of a better fit for him. Bobby, I met, what was it, 3 years ago on Legion? Was the first time we were like a gaffer, rigging gaffer team. Phil, I met, we met on the first season of Mandalorian. He was kind of brought on in prep to kind of work on some of the spaceships before I was ever hired. And then he kind of agreed to join the team. And then Sam actually took over for Phil about, what was it, 2/3, 3/4 of the way through the season?
Something like that.
Yeah, I think I did 6 episodes.
Yeah, so pretty recent for most of us, except for Derek. We go way back. So, but yeah, all these guys, I love these guys. They're a great team and all very smart and very good at their jobs. So I got really lucky with this team on season 1.
Well, and I can definitely say, having spent the past couple of days talking to you guys in preparation for today's conversation, there's great camaraderie amongst this team. I mean, you guys really seem to get along. You know each other very, very well. So it's fortunate. I mean, when you're going into battle on something of this size, it's good to have a team you can really get along with. So let's get right into it. I mean, what I didn't mention is, since we have hit our camera maximum, the voice of God you'll be hearing chiming in throughout the course of the conversation will be co-founder of LiteGear and gaffer to the stars, Mr. Mike Bauman. Mike, say hello.
Hey everyone, how are you? Good to see you.
You as well, bro. Can't really see you, but
yes, I'm here in spirit.
Let's dig right into it. I mean, I think one of the things that we want to kind of talk about first is just the overall the lighting aspects. How did you guys approach lighting a show of this size? I mean, we're going to get into a lot of detail, but just talk about what those early conversations were like, Jeff, and what were you guys? How are you looking to approach this?
Well, Greg Fraser was the first DP that I met on this job. He did 2 episodes, and then Baz Idowin did the rest of the season. And in my first conversations with Greg, and Baz was actually there because he was prepping. So I mean, we did a lot of research on the original Star Wars movies. That was kind of a core lookbook for us, a pretty naturalistic look. I think Greg really was seeking kind of keeping, essentially a naturalistic vibe that was not too far away from the original look. But when we would watch some of the original movies, the lighting is, it could be, maybe you might say, hokey at times when you watch it again, but in your memory, Baz would always talk about this, like when you look back at the Star Wars movies, there is like a look to it that you remember, and it's awesome. And so we kind of wanted to build off of that. And the main lighting was really, LED lighting was a core concept because we were going to be dealing with the volume. We wanted to kind of keep the color fluid, not going in, too far in any direction. But since the volume was LED based, we wanted to keep pretty much the entire lighting system LED based, which meant we had to build a pretty robust network of that Derek and Bobby implemented. And my rigging gaffer actually season 1 was Nick Arnold, but Bobby took over season 2. But yeah, essentially, I mean, we were we were going for that natural vibe, but keeping it in the realm of Star Wars. So I mean, we watched a lot of movies. We watched westerns. We watched the original movies, and that kind of was the core of it.
It's interesting you say Western, because that's one of the things, in our conversations this week. I mean, this definitely has a spaghetti Western feel. You almost feel at some point, if the Mandalorian's helmet were to come off, it'd be Clint Eastwood 30 years ago under that thing. So I can see that was an inspiration. Now, speaking specifically, and this is a great image, I think, to start on, your lighting and having to deal with lighting, a completely reflective surface. Talk about dealing with that.
That was tough. I mean, that was in prep. We were already aware of that issue because it is he's essentially a mirrored surface like a car. So everything that you put into that armor is going to be reflected. So it was hard. We didn't want to go with like a grip square or even just like any sort of frame. So we were like bouncing into walls so you'd see the wall reflected, or having an indicator panel that was a wild panel that you could put in there, or we had set deck build some wild fixtures that we could put into the shot right out of frame, and then it would reflect the fixture. So I mean, that was a conversation that we had very early on, and it wasn't perfect. I mean, there were times where we had to put regular grip frames in and light actors that were standing next to Mando, just because you gotta light them. So it was kind of a play. We kind of were like, well, sometimes if he was standing next to like Carl Weathers, for instance, like we'd have to put a little bit more light in, and so obviously we'd have to we'd see some stuff reflected in his armor. But overall, I mean, it wasn't perfect, but the volume helped a lot. The volume was a nice way to kind of get like a full 360 lighting environment that would reflect naturally. So that was it was a perfect use for the volume, especially with Mando.
Yeah, well, I mean, one thing that I think we had touched on in specifically with Mando, I just lost my train of thought. Oh, I know what I was going to say. Well, one of the things that we had talked about early on was, Jon Favreau, the executive producer, was talking to you about a lot, was cinematic lighting. To always keep this very cinematic, as opposed to other stylistic viewpoints. How did that affect, the way you and Baz approach things?
I mean, what was nice was there were this show had a nice lookbook from the beginning. There was a lot of concept art that we were able to base, kind of get the essence of what each scene was going to be. And so it was already, we could look at something and say, all right, I like that piece, in that image that, Doug Chang was kind of the lead concept artist, and he had such a great eye. And so we would base a lot of our lighting off of that and then kind of build off of that in each scene. So like, I mean, I'm just remembering like the Armorer's Workshop that we did, which we'll talk about later, had a very wonderful lookbook, and like Phil was involved with those conversations a lot because there were specific fixtures that we would have to put in order to augment like the flames and stuff like that. So I mean, in terms of cinematic lighting, I mean that was the goal from the beginning. I don't think there was any specific like details of like here's how we're going to achieve it. I think it was like let's build the world and then work inside of that, especially with the volume. Greg and Baz did a great job building these digital environments, and they lit them in prep, so they were able to kind of build that cinematic universe in prep, and then we could put it on the screen and then build off of that. So I don't know if that answered it, but
no, it totally did. I mean, and I'm sure we're going to get some questions, I think, at some point, but I think definitely talking about how much prep and previs work goes into a series like this, because I know the concept art is prevalent throughout the end credits and stuff. So it really seemed like there was a lot of work done ahead of time. So it was a matter of you guys sort of executing that early on. I remember the question I was going to get to on the Mandalorian specifically, and we had talked about this earlier in the week. You said very rarely did you guys have to go into VFX and actually pull reflections off of any of the armor, right? I mean, you guys really kept that to almost the minimum.
Yeah, we had some tricks that we would use in order to maybe like just dull a little bit if there was some weird specular source in his helmet that looked fake or whatever. But yeah, most of the time it was in the volume or in the cockpit. That stuff was all real. In any set, unless it was like an overhead softbox, maybe we would paint a little bit out, but it was very minimal, very minimal.
Very cool. All right, Mike, do you want to talk about the Beast?
Beast. The monstrosity.
Oh no, have we lost Mr. Bauman? I think Mr. Bauman may have crashed. That could be, well, let's see if we get. Yeah, it does look as though Mr. Bauman and our keynote might have crashed. Well, we'll have to vamp here a little bit. I mean, I guess we can talk about while he kind of reboots and then we hear the voice come in. What the Beast is referring to, right, is a DS fixture that you guys had built, and I think it started with even on the pilot. Let's start talking about that a little bit. We'll see where it goes.
Yeah. Mike Bauman did the lighting test. They were doing like a volume LED wall test, and he was with Greg, and they had built this digital Sputnik custom fixture that was like, I think it was 30 modules, like 10 wide, 3 tall. And so, it was pretty much made out of like, hose clamps and the metal tape and like 2x4s, plexiglass. And so when I came on, Greg essentially was like, I'd like to rebuild that because that was a good fixture. Like it was nice to have a punchy. It was a little bit brighter than a 4K HMI. So it was pretty punchy, but it had full color. We could run effects off it. So that was kind of our volume source. We would put in through some holes in the volume and kind of augment the video wall with that. We'd bring it on our, on some day exteriors too. We would bring it, but most of the time it was used on the volume set, which I wish we could see a photo of it, but we'll get there.
Well, we'll definitely, these things come back, right? At least I don't think it's, GoToMeeting's not shutting us down at this point. This could be Disney legal already, but, we're just going to keep pushing through.
Love you guys at Disney.
in talking about, for season 1 for sure, with the Beast being made of digital Sputnik product, talk about using that. I know that's something that Greg Fraser's been a huge fan of. He clearly has been using those on Dune, and those go back to, I think, when he shot, was it Solo or one of the last
Rogue One?
Yeah,
and
Rogue One.
He did Mary Magdalene. He used predominantly digital Sputnik on that as well.
So let's talk a little bit. Yeah, and I think this would be an interesting part to hear from you and Derek on just dealing with that product and how you guys were able to use it on this show.
Yeah, when I came on, we thought, that they're not a cheap lighting source, so that was definitely there were a lot of discussions in prep about how do we afford, getting these digital Sputniks on the job, and Greg did a great job of, talking to them and showing them that this was going to be a useful lighting source because you can strip them apart, use them in soft boxes, you can build them into one single source, and they, essentially we built a package where we could essentially use digital Sputniks on any set and move them from set to set. So we're not necessarily doing drop loads of them. We pretty much had a large stockpile of them that we had the whole season and moved them around. So it was a little bit cheaper to do it that way for run of show. But yeah, the fact that you can do full color on them and they're one of the punchiest LEDs, you can bounce them, you can put them in a condor. For me, they're awesome. I think some of their software they were improving as we were working, so we were talking with them and improving as we went. Yeah, Derek, they're pretty simple to control from the board side.
Oh yeah, I think you and I are on the same page. We really enjoy using these fixtures. For me, it's great. It can be a little complicated for the operators with this amount of fixtures on one show. I think we had over 800 individual modules or something that we were dancing around the whole season.
Wow, that's got to be
number. It was big.
That's got to be the lion's share of what's available right now. Globally, I would think.
Yeah, they shipped out. Oh, Bobby's back.
Hey guys,
Nice.
sorry about that.
Yeah, they shipped a bunch over from the UK because they had most of them over there. So we brought a bunch over. They manufactured some for us, and but they came through. We got everything we needed on in terms of the modules, and yeah, we used them all the way into season 2.
Yeah, I think once we get the keynote back up, we can talk about too. I think you guys used them almost as overheads too for various soft boxes. If I remember one of the stills, and we'll get to that still. How was that in comparison to either products you've used in other shows or products you might have used on season 2?
Sorry, I just let's see. Yeah, we use them in soft boxes. That was not the ideal use for them. I think we had so many, and it was nice to kind of build that in. But from a rigging standpoint, it was very, very difficult. And the guys did a great job. Nick and his riggers did an amazing job getting that whole thing working. I mean, they had no time. I think they worked 7-day weeks for like 2 weeks straight. I mean, those guys rocked it. But yeah, I mean, we made some adjustments. I think we saw how much work went into that, and I think it was a little extensive for what it was. So it worked great for what we had. But I think for a softbox, they could be a little punchy, and we had to double diffuse it, and that caused a little bit of extra rigging work. But it looked great. It gave us plenty of output, and but I think the main use for those is just like building them into like larger punchy, not overhead boxes for ambience. I would use them more as like more of a key source.
Well, I like the way y'all used them as singles, and y'all just run and gun with them, and y'all could just throw it in real quick, battery powered and with the Antons.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, we used them for ground units. Obviously, we used them for a lot of explosion lights and fire gags and blaster hits and things like that. I think they're versatile because we can make them red. We can, do a quick fire, quick pop here. They have a great low end Kelvin rating, so like you can go. We did a lot of explosions and fire effects with those.
So
yeah.
I think Jeff, Mike just made you the presenter. So if you want to actually bring the keynote up.
Oh yeah. Let's see here.
You might be able to do that. I can walk you through that process. It sounds like Lord Bauman's internet went down, so it could be the volume of live streams that he's doing on a given day.
Is it showing now?
Yeah, you look great now. You might be able to hit play and go full screen. If not, we're having to work off of this.
Let's see here. How do I do that?
The top middle there. See play?
You know what? It's fine. Let's go with this right now. It doesn't matter that we can see the keynote screen. I think this is still great.
How's that?
Yeah,
There it is. Perfect. So why don't we just let's go through this quickly. So let's talk about that's the one that Mike and Greg Fraser built for the pilot, right?
Yeah. So all right, here we go. Now we're back. So this is the lighting test DS Beast, we'll call it, 2x4s and such. This was obviously because there was no prep time. This was an on-the-day project. So little plexi and wood there. Obviously, this is not COVID approved, but yeah, so that pretty awesome. So this is kind of the first idea, and then we ended up obviously adjusting it a little bit. This was our version. We added about 10 more modules, and it worked great. I mean, our special effects crew, Roy Cancino and Gem Effects, they helped build this frame, and then I think Matt Ardeen actually gave us this bail that he had for a beam, and then we retrofitted it for the Beast.
Yeah, that makes sense because I've seen a lot of Matt's pictures. Matt's a huge fan of the product, and I know he's made some great beam frames like this. But this is a considerable improvement from the 2x4s and plexi.
Yeah. I mean, definitely never an ideal. Just because, as you can tell, there's 40 head feeders coming out of it. So they all run back to a ballast cart that we built.
Oh wow.
That had has all the ballasts, and then it kind of rode together all the time. So yeah,
That's like a 12-18K ballast size right there, living in a sandbag cart. Now, did I see a little bit of LED ribbon in the side of that ballast cart?
Yeah, that was a little G-job fun project we had.
Love that. That looks great.
But yeah, DS we use all the time. We would build them into these arrays, put them like sometimes we would test. This is actually a test we did that we put through like some bigger softbox, like key side boxes. I think this ended up being, what was it, Bobby, an 8x20. 8x20. Yeah.
So just going back to the Beast, I mean, what was the weight of that thing once you guys were all said and done?
Oh man, it's hard to say. I think I mean, that was at least 2 guys to lift that thing. It was
Four
super heavy.
guys.
That thing was beefy, very beefy.
4 big
Yeah.
guys.
Yeah. So yeah, obviously we used a lot of DS. We had beams, we had the beasts, we had a lot. I think we had. What do we? I think we only had a number of DS1s, but I think we had 100 DS3 kits, like 60 some 65 DS6s. We had some beams and the beast that we rolled around.
So with the beast, Derek, how many channels is the beast?
I know it takes its own universe. I think it'd be 400 channels because 10 channels per module. So we just put a 1 universe node that rode with it. So you just run EtherCon to the controllers, and guys don't need to worry about any other configuration. So that was, yeah, every actual DS module on the show was patched individually. So we, at any point, we could go down to individual control or apply a fire effect really easily to some of these larger fixtures and kind of just work right out the box.
Wow, great. And then just from just a quick standpoint from your perspective, you're using what console throughout this whole show?
So we're using GrandMA 2 software with GrandMA 2 hardware. We have, I run main unit on a Lite and a command wing as a backup media server kind of off to the side. And then rigging has 2 command wings. B unit has a command wing. And then we have a server room with a stack of MPUs that kind of runs. We actually run all of our stages on 1 show file. So excluding the backlot, 3 stages at MBS all linked together, 1 show file. So every light, whether it's floor package or rigging, is all patched in the same show file and can be accessed from any console on any stage at any time or any tablet. So yeah, it was very useful. So, a lot of times we had 2 units rolling. We had basically the same floor package duplicated for A and B unit. But a lot of times we'd switch, maybe you'd need 4 beasts for a rig on A unit, or maybe B unit needed 4 beams, or maybe B unit needed to use steal some lights for first unit. So it was very easy for us to share our packages back and forth. And whether you were programming A unit or B unit, you had access to the entire lighting package for both units.
That's phenomenal. So you did mention the word backlot in there, and I think that's our next queued up slide. Let's talk a little bit about the backlot. I mean, I'm sure most of the attendees know that this is obviously a big stage show, but you guys did have a backlot locally here in LA, and let's talk a little bit about that. What was I mean, go ahead, Jeff.
Oh no, I mean essentially, we obviously had the volume. I think that's well known, which is great for a lot of a little softer. Softer lit scenes like dusk scenes and stuff like that. I think we did learn that we could do a little bit more hard light at a certain point. But I think at the beginning of season 1, we decided that a lot of the day exterior work should be done in real sun. Greg really pushed for that, so we did have a backlot that we would go to. It was just an open lot that we'd put a bunch of blue screens onto. And we're able to, we built some sets out there, season 1, and yeah, I mean, mostly blue screen. I think that was the majority of our work out there, but it was great to have that hard sun look. I think if we had, Jon Favreau really pushed for that. He wanted to have that natural, Western like hard sun. You can only get so hard on a volume, and then you got to have that the realism that comes from a real hard, source from many miles away. So almost every exterior that was hard light was on the backlot. So I mean, we had first season we had mostly DSs back there. We did have some HMIs, and we had the UFO, which is an amazing machine. This was our hard sunlight that we could use to extend our day on the back lot. And Bobby did a wonderful job rigging this thing all the time. And UFO Dwayne and John at UFO, came through and did a wonderful job operating this crane for us. I don't know,
Bobby.
Bob, you want to talk about it at all?
Yeah, get in on this one.
It's a lot of amps, 18Ks. So it's like, about 2,000 amps. It's less, but our UPM was actually able to get Edison to drop city power there, which was pretty unbelievable. So we actually had 480 there and transformers. So that was really nice to be able to utilize that and not having to put all those HMIs on a generator. But yeah, we had 2 loops essentially in the back lot. We had a 9-piece loop that powered set lighting, and then a 5-piece loop for slot power, special effects, and any other stuff we could dream up. Because we about maxed out that transformer every day exterior. We were out there.
Wow, and so it looks like you're running then a second on that image, Jeff. We could just go back. I mean, in addition to the UFO, it looks like you've got additional ArriMax 18s on a separate Condor.
Yeah, it was nice. I mean, because the UFO is great. I think it's a wonderful single source light to kind of mimic sun. It's obviously not quite as hard as the sun, but I think it gave us the contrast ratio we needed for a lot of our cloudy days. And then it was, you always got to have a couple extra condors with 18Ks for either if we did like a splinter shot, or if we just needed another edge from a different side. So sometimes we would use them in conjunction if we needed to cover a larger area.
I think it's interesting that you mentioned cloudy days, and we're by no means going to give away where this back lot takes place, but let's just say it's in a portion of Los Angeles that does get a lot of overcast sky. And I think, being able to augment this had to be a super time saver for you guys.
Oh, absolutely. And even in the morning, I mean, we could get that light on before the sun was even up, and at least get like a general vibe, and then we could shut it off, move it over to the other side of the back lot so that we could cover for the sunset. And then I would kind of just match it to wherever, I'd be aware of where the sun was moving, and if the clouds came in, we could just arm it up and pop it in. So that was nice. So like this is a shot of, we track the sun, and I would just kind of move it as we went.
That's a great image. That really shows, how you guys are using the UFO to augment that. And I think, Bobby, I'm going to ask 2 questions. If you could just elaborate a little bit for the attendees who might not know, what is the UFO? What does it either stand for? What's it mean? And then do you have spot and flood control with this system or with this rig?
Negative. So essentially, when you order the UFO, what you're getting there is that crane platform with the 3 pieces of triangle truss that the actual lights are mounted to. And basically, it's just a blank canvas, and then you can put whatever you want on it. So you can see the 3 pieces of triangle truss. So that's what comes on it. And then the grips were kind enough to build out the frame for us, along with helping us mount our lights. The rig actually can take a techno arm on it too. It's a pretty versatile piece of equipment, but basically it's dealer's choice when you order it. It comes with no lights, nothing on it, and then you can use it as you see fit. But it's pretty amazing. The access and the movement that it has is unreal, because it can pan and tilt in a appropriate manner. I don't know if you ever tried to rotate a condor basket 90 degrees and then tip it. You get that really funky tip. You can't get that really nice tip. And this UFO will give you that perfect tip any way you want because of its multi-axis head.
Wow, phenomenal. And Jeff, what were you doing with the actual ArriMaxes themselves? Were they always on a full spot, or were they a sort of a medium? I mean, were you guys looking to just fill that frame, or really give you some sharp punch with full spot?
It actually depends. I mean, I obviously didn't want to burn the rag, which was a half soft frost. So the max I would go would be like a half spot, which I think we lived at for a majority of it. I think we started full flood because we were worried about burning it. But as we went, we got a little bit more confident. So I think by the end we were doing a little bit more of a 1/3 to half spot on all those, which I think if we did it again, Bobby and I have talked about, it would be nice to have flood spot control on those from that, but usually it's 9 18Ks all have flood spot control. Usually they come with like a pan tilt mechanism, which we don't really need. So we've been talking about how do we build that in.
That's working.
Future.
Yeah, well, maybe that's.
We might be able to figure something out.
I was just going to say, maybe that's something that Sam and his team can work out.
A little motor control. It's not too
Yeah,
hard.
baby. Let's do it.
Or Arduino.
So let's go through a couple more of these great backlot pictures.
Yeah.
Oh, I guess so. Well, then I guess that's what we've got. I think there's been couple questions. I mean, Derek, how much DMX control did you guys have out here, and was it all hardwired, or were you guys actually running some wireless DMX on the back lot? And you were saying this was also attached to the same show file, correct?
Yeah, so as you can imagine, on the backlot, we didn't use quite as many of the LED sources. So what we would do is just take updated copy of the show file from the stage just to make sure we had any color presets or effects that we might need to reference. And we bring that to the backlot. So if Jeff did call for any of the, the LED package, we would have it ready to go. As far as the actual rig, the networking was run identical to the stage. So we have full network kind of run to every distro. So first season, I spent a lot of time with my console actually in a seat container, kind of hidden away, and I would just be out on a tablet near Jeff. And that worked. So I'd communicate wirelessly back to my console, which would then control the lights. And then second season, I actually got myself a little tent, and I would stay closer to Video Village. But I have to admit, the backlot was usually pretty easy days for the programmer.
Well,
we'd have
no
some
lie.
indicator lights, and we'd have some button panels on the building, stuff like that, maybe some sconces. But compared to the type of work we were doing on stage, which is literally cues and effects every scene, almost every take, it was kind of nice to go on the backlot. My biggest complaint was dust and heat usually.
Sure.
Yeah, Derek's main job on the backlot was dusting for sure.
Well, before we move on to our next slide, just before we leave the backlot, what was the days that you guys would have per episode, or was it really episode specific on how much time on the backlot versus how much time on the stages?
It really depended. I mean, I think we had somewhere around 15. I would say 10 to 20 day episodes, depending on what we were doing. And I think we spend a few days out on the backlot, and I think obviously it depends on the episode. Like episode 2, season 1, we did. That was almost all backlot. That the Mudhorn Cave was. They spent 2 weeks out there. So we did a lot of second unit where main unit would be on stage, second unit would be on the backlot. As far as because for us, we would split. It was A B unit essentially. It wasn't really first second unit because they were both very big. So I would usually stay on stage, and then second unit gaffer would be on the backlot.
Very cool. Well, I've heard rumor that Mr. Bauman is back with us. Mike, can you hear us?
Yes, I hear you loud and clear.
Nice.
Our backup system worked. This is fantastic. First time we've tried it, it worked beautifully, and you guys are going. So yeah, keep it going. But this is great.
Mike, do you want to jump in and ask some fixtures questions for us?
Yeah, obviously fixtures were a big component of the show, and I know Jeff in our conversations and talking with Phil and Sam, just you guys had a lot of different types of integrations, whether they're like that, like cockpit integrations or stuff like handheld. So I don't know, how did that go for you guys from first season to second season, that kind of thing?
Phil, if you want to start, kind of how y'all got integrated into using the practical buttons.
Yeah, so the request from Favreau and Lucasfilm was to keep everything as tactile for the actors as possible. So we wired all the buttons to function as the button that it is, as well as have dimmable control from the console. So everything was a giant pile of wiring.
Wow. And so, for instance, on this spaceship, Phil, and between you and Derek, how many universes is like the cockpit, for instance?
I can't remember that offhand. I think it's
340 fixtures inside the cockpit.
Wow.
So I think there was probably 10 to 12 of those were actual lights, RGBW or Cine 6 lights. But yeah, majority of it was individual controlled buttons.
As well as almost everything in the cockpit wilds. So the panels themselves would have to be self-contained, and then you'd have to bury the controllers in with them so that each puzzle piece could come out separately and not have to undo hundreds of wires.
Yeah. And then in the second season, they added a whole wing to it. My apologies, Jeff. Go ahead.
Oh, well, Yeah, we should go down that route too much, but
Sure.
this shot right here has this panel right behind Baby Yoda. The child. This is the wild child panel. So this panel would wild because we need to get some shots from behind that the pram. So this was the panel that we'd pull out for that they did a nice job on.
Yeah,
What
that's
do we got?
That's
that's good.
LiteGear's 24 channel controller without a case on it because we had to fit it in the wall. It was too thick with the metal case, so just took it all apart.
That's awesome. I haven't even seen that. That's really, that's a great shot.
Those panels were all part of the little town that we had, and we would flip those back and forth to the back lot as well. But usually it'd get reconfigured from set decks placement.
So in a panel like that, I mean, talk a little bit about the lights that are in each one of those. I mean, again, this is going back to full dimmability in the panel. Are there multiple colors per button, or is it single color per button?
Most of it was single color per button, but they were having trouble outsourcing enough buttons, so I think some of these are just the little plexi screens.
Yeah, on these particular, yeah, it's a couple plexi screens.
Did you guys run like any sequences in there? Just general glows or things like that, or did you kind of had just like, hey, give me some eye candy in that thing?
So Tom Howard, you want to talk about Tom, or about how Tom like set the look of every single button panel?
Yes. So Tom is my rigging programmer. So he was the one who patched all these. Literally, I think we had over 10,000 fixtures by the end of the season. So Tom would patch all these fixtures, work very close with the fixtures department to have all these layouts and everything patched in the console. And then Tom, like myself, were big fans of Star Wars. So we were actually really happy to take on the responsibility of making all of these buttons look right. And we took it as a compliment when we didn't get any notes. So we had our little way of like a scheme of what lights blink on a door panel normally, or if you're in a cockpit, I talked with Dave Filoni and we kind of figured out the general function of the panels around the cockpits, and then we could animate them to our imagination. But yeah, so everything did have some blinking, slow blinking, and every button was visited individually for brightness and level. It was a lot of time, especially in the spaceships.
Well, I think it's interesting that you touch on having those conversations with Dave, because even in the first episode of the Disney behind the scenes, I mean, Dave talks about being such a fan of Star Wars and really knowing the canon so well. So it's interesting, that you have that same sort of affinity for the series, right? And to be able to put that imagination in from your love and experience of enjoying Star Wars, that's cool. That's a testament to, this show and the work that you guys were doing. That's great. So Phil, tell us, what are we looking at here?
Actually, I think that's a SAM panel.
Yeah, that one's from the second season. So the second season we got some stuff from the UK. We had to kind of match, be able to control their panels, and also be able to control our panels. So a lot of theirs came in with MDF boxes on the back. This is one of ours. We ended up actually using a CNC machine to build our boxes out of 3/4 inch plywood. There's one of my guys, Raymond Hoy. And it's the CNC machine that we used. But yeah, we ended up taking LiteGear's high density cards and hybrid cards and putting them in the back of each one of these boxes for any of our backlit panels. And then a lot of the other wiring on that panel is just indicator lights. But yeah, we ended up having to tie into 16 gauge or 16 conductor ribbon wire to be able to use, again, trying to integrate into the UK system because we utilize so many of their panels. We use their PMBS LV966 controllers with an IDC connector. They have a high output here on the side, so if we ended up putting in any larger backlit boxes, graphics or panels, we could tie into there. You could put a whole meter of LiteGear ribbon on that, a hybrid ribbon on that, or whatever ribbon, it's good for 8 amps. But yeah, that's kind of the back of our panels. That's, there was probably about, I think we built probably 160 of those, something like that. I had guys in the shop all season long, literally just building these and testing the stuff from the UK. So, and then as you see on the back of there, those are our circuit numbers per our 96 channel controller. So this is going to be in our third port, 33 through so here we go, 33 through 48, and then you'll see 49 through 69. So it kind of indicates where you want to put those leads into the controller as well. And it also helps me build the patch sheets, and then helps Tom and Derek be able to see what each individual circuit is. And then from there, we build it into fixture numbers and build maps with Tom and Derek.
Wow, great.
Digitally, they would have, digitally they would have overviews of each one of those panels.
This was kind of cool when we were talking about this, the boom box and what that did. Because again, a lot of custom work here. So yeah, talk about this a bit.
This is the brainchild from myself and a couple of my guys. Special effects came to us with an issue how every time they go to do a squib hit, or there's the human element, there's always that delay, and it can cost a lot of money whenever you're doing several takes. So they came to us and wanted to see if we could sync it up with our lighting, augmented lighting for some of our blaster control or other types of augmented lighting. So we basically just tied it into our system, and we were able to put it into queues with the augmented lighting and then delay it to make it, all kind of sync up in the same fashion. And it just, it was just kind of something we played around with. It worked pretty well. I'm not gonna say it worked every shot, but when it was needed, it definitely helped out.
How big did you guys run with the fixtures department?
Majority of the time we were 1-1 and 5, 1-1 and 6. At one point in time when we had some of the bigger sets, we got up to 1-1 and 10, 1-1 and 11. So, but
gotcha.
I mean, it was definitely warranted. We had a lot of stuff going on.
Yes.
The first season they kept us very small. It was usually just me and like 3 people.
Yeah. When I took over on the first season, it was me and Derek Esperanza. Like, it was not very many people, and then again bringing in a guy or 2 on the weekends to help out.
Phil, tell us a little bit about that. I mean, in season 1, because it seemed like, we're doing a TV series about space, and it takes place in space, but there wasn't a lot really considered when it came to fixtures. And, you guys, you had to tackle that with a very, very limited team.
Yeah. Amanda Serino was a set decorator, and she got in there. We had previously worked together on a couple other projects. Godzilla had some pretty serious spaceship kind of work in it as well. So she knew that she needed help with the buttons, and kind of helped push to get a fixture person involved. I think it was like in June or July when I first went in to just start looking at the concept art, what they wanted to do with the cockpits. It took a little while to get up and going, and then it was the big fight with just trying to get budget space carved out for us.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think, Derek alluded to how many fixtures, you wound up with at the end of the season. I mean, I think it was in the thousands. So it's interesting to see that the transition from season 1 with such a limited crew into season 2 with, Sam being able to bring in almost an entire department, a fully fleshed out department. So.
Yeah, Phil definitely paved the way, and he did the hard work for me. So thank you, Phil.
What are we looking at here?
I think that was a one-off panel that I made for Jeff.
Big hero.
Yeah, we have these like hero cards that we use that are nice, like super lightweight. We put diffusion over it. There's a little egg crate, a little louver that we can throw on there, and that's kind of we use it for, a reflection in Mando's helmet or an eye light. Just a quick battery-powered wireless DMX option.
How many different versions of LED tape were you guys using? Like hybrid, Cine 6, Pixel, I assume.
pretty much we used everything. I think season 1 we had a kind of a weird assortment based off of what was available and pricing. I think we tried to do as much Cine 6 as possible. We did end up doing some like RGB day and RGBT stuff, and obviously some hybrid when it was, when we knew we weren't going to go into any weird colors, because that obviously is a little bit of a cheaper option.
Yeah.
So speaking of weird colors, what's on that next slide?
Oh man, this was this was something Sam made.
Well,
yeah, go for it.
Myself and Phil had worked on a job previously before this Space Jam, and this was one of his designs. I totally bastardized it and stole his idea, but it worked out wonderfully. So if you wanted to talk about it, Phil, you can go ahead, buddy. Do you know what it is?
Yeah, it's just it's a 8x8 pixel matrix per side, and we originally built them on a Space Jam to try and light up a VFX basketball. So when they were dribbling, you'd have this omnidirectional glow, but they needed it to be pixels so that we could run a video feed through it. And then I think you just reordered the parts and kind of reassembled it for this.
Pretty much, yeah. Pretty much.
Yeah.
We didn't have all 4
great.
sides. We were able to keep the bottom off because it didn't need to be 360, so gave us a little better access, or a little more access.
So Phil, what's this made of? I mean, what pixel is it?
It is I forget the name of it, but it's a dot star 8x8 pixel matrix that you can get from Adafruit.
Okay.
It's just an already assembled PCB, and then we ended up soldering it together into a square.
And then are you running this on a wireless pixel controller, or is it wired? I can't tell from the image.
The one that I built previously was wireless, because again, we needed to put it inside of a basketball. This one, I don't know what you did, Sam.
It is wireless. We did have the ability to hardline the power for it if we needed, but it's controlled wirelessly.
I think in the version that I had, I'd got a pixel control from a place called NLED, and we took apart those really small wireless antennas, not the Centennas, the other ones.
Oh, Skynodes. Yep, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was one universe pixel.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Great.
Wow. And now into Mr. DeChellis's land. Of course, any good lighting setup needs a strong backbone on both cable and network. And you talk a little bit about how you kind of approached, power needs and all this, because you're obviously serving a lot of different folk.
Yeah, always try to isolate everybody as much as possible. So when things grow or things start to behave funny, you can keep them all separate. That's our data rig up in the perms for the volume stage. That middle tier you see there, that's all fiber cable, which we ran for the wall. It's a lot. And then if this is an early on picture, so if you later on you'd see some other cables on the top tier. That was some utility stuff for some of the other departments. And then bottom tier was our networking, and there's one of our data spiders. So pretty simple hot power rig, no dimmers, really involved except for small fixture dimmers. So loop circuits on every stage, and then we put these things we call data spiders up high, and we distribute Ethernet basically to every distro, and the network is everywhere. So whenever we need to add or do whatever, it's very easy.
Gotcha. That's so I mean, just to talk, like, obviously everything was very network heavy. Oh, that's a great shot of your data spiders. Yeah, could you just talk a bit about what all that is in there?
So that's a node mixed with some RDM optosplitters and some switches and some other stuff. But basically, yeah, just a way to distribute data. Because this show is all swing sets. None of this is permanently rigged. So we used to call it loading the catapult. You put all these pieces in up high, and then as sets come in throughout the year, you sort of, like on chess, you control the center of the board, and then there's just moves available for you. Oh, look, perfect. There's a data spider here. We have this here. So by having, all that stuff just sort of, ready to go, the catapult is ready. Tons of swing sets, all the time. The show was, so essentially it was, 4 hours, 8 episodes at a half hour. And you figure they shot in half the time of a feature. So, I always think it's like 4 times the amount of work. You have double the sets in half the time. And there was a lot of it.
And then the technicians on the floor, what were they kind of interacting with? Like,
that we got that
obviously
from
they had
Dad.
yeah.
There you go. So that's every distro box. Oh, if you go forward one.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Yeah. So every distro box had a node and an 8-port node and an 8-port switch on it, and we had extra ones of these boxes, so you could essentially add as many as you needed. We got some stuff from Dadco. The previous slide, it was a node lunch pail. So unfortunately, we didn't get our hands on a Unity until the end of the season. But it's about getting distributing data to first unit. They had, I think, 6 universes. First unit, second unit had 6 universes, and there were some other universes. So 20 floor universes at any given time needed accessibility. Not to mention stuff for fixtures and for us, especially because it was so many swing sets. Things were rigged off the ground a lot. We weren't able to drop in cables like we would do for a permanent set. A lot of stuff on the floor. There's some.
Yeah, how did that work for cable management? I mean, did you have a lot of breaks that would happen just with every, you've got a lot of departments working in that tight space?
We had a lot of Ethernet. All ground Ethernet was EtherCon. So anything that was ran up in the perms or was going to stay permanent, we got cheap at Ethernet off Amazon, but lots of EtherCon. So I don't think we had too many busted EtherCons by the end of the show. They held up rather nice.
How did you end up? I was curious. Like, obviously, you got a lot of data flying around and managing that amount of data, but then also power. Like, how did you end up? Talk a bit about. Oh, yeah. What is this?
So that was fun. So that's a power monitor that we got hooked up to our Wi-Fi network. So we were able to integrate at the end of the season last year. Essentially a system that allows any juicer to type in the IP address as you see there, and they can check the amps, volts, and a bunch and harmonics, and among other things on each stage, which is interesting because if you can actually see on this how bad our power factor is, it's really low. And these are all lights that supposedly have really good power factor. So just things you have to calculate for. LEDs aren't the low-level power draw that everybody thinks they are, because they can wreak havoc with the way they use power, especially on generators. Generators really hate LEDs. So lots of derating of equipment with the mixture of stuff we had.
Yeah,
so what's plugged into, what device actually is transmitting you to your phone this particular piece of data?
So 2 pieces. So one is the wireless access point that we have as part of our lighting network, and then we had a system I got from Hioki, and that's the device that's hooked up to the cam that I hooked up to the copper lugs, and then there's a Ethernet cable that hooks into that puts this on our network. So this is just a device on our network essentially.
Wow, great.
Well, I mean, it's a great segue because obviously everything in this entire show is about control and network, and and you guys have really pushed the bar on this, and a lot of it falls into Mr. Hoffman's lap with kind of what you guys were doing. Clearly a fan of streaming ACN, a big fan of streaming ACN. I'd like to talk about that. Could you just comment about this part? I get the part about eating burritos. That's good to know. And, but talk about, I would really talk about your network protocols and, like streaming ACN versus just why you a fan of it.
Well, if we're talking about network protocols, a lot of people, there's 2 big ones that everyone uses, ArtNet and streaming ACN. But with GrandMA 2 software, they all the consoles speak over MANet, which is a third protocol, and streaming ACN and MANet can be transmitted on the same network with very little issue. Whereas ArtNet, which is what a lot of other
people like to use won't work with us. So people have to use two. Basically, Bobby would have to rig two networks across all of our stages. So first reason why I love streaming ACN is because it can run on the same network as MANet. So we only have to have one network across all of our stages. So it's very simplified there for the riggers and also for the operators, because we're also running a lot of our lights direct streaming ACN. So all the beams and the beast, a couple other lights, they all have built-in gateways basically. So as you mentioned before, we had 6 universes of our floor package, but I'd say 3 of those universes never actually had to be configured on the node, because all the lights patched on 3 of those universes could take EtherCon directly. So it just makes it a little bit simpler. It's one less thing that the operators have to think about when Jeff calls for a light, because you just plug it in, just like power. You see an open outlet, you just plug in the EtherCon and the light will immediately listen to the right universe. So I love streaming ACN for that reason. What else? Oh, same thing. We ran all of our, we had a wireless droid. So not including the 6 universes of floor package, we actually had 2 or 3 universes of wireless lights on each unit. And so right here, you see we have 6 universes of wireless transmission. And this whole unit was just fed with one EtherCon cable. So again, no configuration. All you need to do, it had a super stinger coming out of the back of it. So the guys would just plug one EtherCon in and then power it with the Edison. And then now all of a sudden you have all 6 universes of wireless available for that unit.
When you guys
so really
were,
streaming ACN, it just, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Derek.
I was just going to say, it really just makes, one of the big weaknesses with using a lot of universes on your floor packages. The guys are constantly have to reconfigure the nodes, especially if the PVD run out with one universe, and then now all of a sudden you need a light with a different universe, but it's in the same spot. It's usually where problems start occurring. So by removing GMX 512 completely from some of our lights, it made it very easy.
Great. I was curious, how does your guys' workflow go with set operations as far as networking? Where was it just everyone got to the point where they were so savvy that it was the floor guys were handling most of the network, the floor team was, or was it did you have a data team in there also?
Yeah, we have one DMX tech on each unit, kind of a guy that worked very close with me, could cover me at any time, and also understood in depth how the network ran. So usually in the beginning of the day, he would make sure that all the nodes and the PVDs were labeled and assigned for the work for that day. But I will say that anyone on our crew is fully capable of programming nodes and troubleshooting. We kind of make it a point to make sure anyone who isn't familiar with that or comfortable, we'll just set them aside with one of our other guys and say, hey, why don't you run through everything, make sure they know kind of how we run, because I think that's how Jeff expects things to be.
Yeah, it's all about efficiency. I hear you.
Yep. Yeah.
Well, I mean, if we could, we'd start talking about some of the sets, because there are just so many great things happening here. NEVARRO Street.
Yeah,
Mr. Webster.
So, yeah, this was the big rig we had on stage. This was one of the first major projects we had. This was that massive softbox we built overhead. I think there were 400 modules we built up there, which we'll show in a minute. Right now, I'm just going to kind of go through some of the vibe of that scene. And this was mostly, I mean, to be honest, it was mostly this overhead box that we built for kind of a brighter night vibe, and then we kind of augmented with all the fixtures, and then we would punch. I think we put 1000H on all those grills on the sides, and we'd punch a bunch of DSs through there. But yeah, the overall was just a brighter night vibe, and then building in accents for Mando, which is usually what we ended up doing, was just kind of, accenting his armor enough so that it just picked up. Because I think that was an early conversation we had, was how do we build in emotion and character into someone that's wearing a helmet. And we talked about how do we give him little highlights and little pings, so he's not just a dark void behind his visor. There's a little life in there. So here you can see we obviously added some highlights to give him a little bit of personality. And then this just kind of shows we did a lot of interactive lights. So you know, he'd had a flamethrower obviously that he would use. So, you know, I think for this shot we put like 4 or 5 DS6s underneath this this hovercraft, and we would cue it whenever he would, you know, throw that flame, and then we would throw stuff back at him. That's why the DSs are great for that, just because they have, you know, they do full color, and you can obviously shift it down to 1500 Kelvin, 2000 Kelvin. I think I think we had an effect, Derek, that we ran between those 2 colors just to kind of give it some life, and that it was a benefit of having the DS6s because you can pixel map them. And so Derek would run some effects through there. So this was that rig. Sorry, I went too fast there. So that was that overhead with all the individual modules up there. The guys did a great job. I mean, that was a pain in the butt because they built the set slightly angled because they needed the throw of the road had to be long enough. So they built it diagonal on the stage. So it was hard for the riggers to line up everything because it wasn't lined up with the perms. So anyways, that was a real pain, but they did a great job.
What's
And
the
it turned out
material
really well.
that you made the box out of? Is that it looks pretty light.
Yeah, this was when it was sucked all the way up. We had a double diffusion. I believe we had a quarter grid intermediate, and then we did a full grid. I think we did a full grid bottom diff. That was the intermediate. Let's see. So that's the quarter grid up top, and then this bottom truss I think we had full grid on there. Maybe it was light grid actually. I think we wanted a little bit more output. But then we could raise and lower the bottom diff depending on the softness we wanted. So if we wanted a little bit more of a warehouse vibe, we could build it. We could put it in like that, or we could drop it, and then the sources would mix.
So those modules were all from DS6s?
No, not all of them. I mean, we had 100
I gotcha.
DS3 kits. So I mean, we put let's
DS3s.
see, we put 40 of those 40 modules into the beast, and then we had you know, we had a lot left over, so we could load that up into the ceiling. So there were some DS6s. As you can see, we had to pull all the frames off, and we got some custom cables from DS to extend out from there because we wanted to be able to use those DS6s later. You know, have the option to build up. They're just a nicer unit than using the DS3s sometimes. So we just had an excess of 6s that we could use, which ended up being a real pain. No lie. No lie.
Yeah, just keep walking through some of this stuff. This is all really great.
Yeah, so let's see. This was shot on the back lot, and over several nights. It was raining. It was the middle of, I think it was early January we shot this, so it was raining and wet, and we got rained out one night. We actually had lightning for the first time in LA in my career, so we had to shut down. But this was fun because it was a big scene with an AT-ST walker, and or was it AT-AT, Derek? I always get those mixed up.
No, you got it.
Yeah, cool. And so we had the concept was this AT-ST comes into these ponds and starts blasting at these villagers. So we had to build in obviously it was a huge blue screen. We obviously I think we had 4 condors that night. But they're running across all these ponds. It was a huge area to cover. And then the AT-ST comes in and has this super bright, essentially headlight. So we used a PRG Best Boy on a jib for that. So we have all our blue screen. I think we had 4 condors and a couple of fly swatters. And yeah, let's see. I want to get to a good one here. So those are 2 of our condors. We had 3 DS6s in each of them. With I think we had we had solar frames, the high-end system solar frames, theaters underneath. We used the theaters. Obviously, I think I would have liked to use the 3000s, but we carried the theaters the whole show, so we were able to bring them out here and use them just to kind of backlight some smoke and get some hot spots on the background. And then these were some DS3s. We popped DS3s all around as firelight, which they're great. I mean, we just run the effects through them, and they had a great color. So that's the jib that we used with the Best Boy on it, and then we rigged a little DS3 on top for a little blaster light.
Gotcha.
Now, Derek, were you controlling that live, or was that on like a tracking system, or how were you dealing with that?
I recall, no, I didn't control, as you can see right there, Joey Kennedy is actually operating it live through that camera feed. But I think I had control over maybe brightness and color or something. But for the most part, that he was operating it.
And what is that operating system? Because I think I've seen that at a show here or there.
It's PRG ground control, right? Is that what it's called?
Yeah. Yeah, it's essentially a modified version of a PRG Best Boy, which has an infrared camera on it, and then full controls down on that system that he's holding right there. So he can pan tilt. He has access to all the gobo, wheels, focus, iris, all that kind of stuff. Actually, you can fully control the fixture if you want, or you can opt for certain parameters to be controlled from the console.
Very cool. Now, Jeff, just going back to, I think maybe one of the wides where you've got the ATS sort of on its side. What are you guys using to light the blue screen?
Those are all Cineo HS2s with their blue panels in, which are really great. I mean, you barely have to have them on, and they definitely put out some UV. So they definitely almost look like a black light sometimes, but they glow the blue screen great. And when I talked to the VFX guys after they were done, with this scene, and they said it was a great key, and they were able to pull a nice key from that. So definitely, I mean, I wouldn't personally. I do like the blue panels if they're on their own in the background. I think if you're mixing like an overhead box that has daylight in it, I usually go daylight on panels. But for this, it was the blue panels.
Cool.
Yeah.
The public house is kind of interesting. We were talking about this a bit. A lot going on in that space,
Yeah. This one was Greg and I kind of worked on this one for a while. He wanted to really not very bright. We wanted to source mostly from that window, which is not very big. So we had to put a lot of light through there. I think we had four DS beams going through there, and then the rest was overhead DS6s through full grid or magic cloth on the ceiling, and then we would augment with some 4x8 frames for these guys, and then I think all those little slashes were DS6s pointed straight down on the background. I think we'll get to those. Those are in the background there.
So on this particular thing here, just going back to the hologram, I mean, it looks to me like there's a puck or something there. Phil, is that something that you had created that they would then lay the holo in after?
I believe so. I'm actually not remembering right off the top of my head on that one. I know that there was a holographic projector that we put in the Razor Crest cockpit. That was a pixel rig that we built. I believe this was as well. Do you remember?
I don't remember.
I think this was a prop. Josh Roth, I believe, he built it was like a briefcase that opened that had a little LED in it that we could dim and control. So it was actually pretty good. I metered it. I think it was somewhere around like 4,500 Kelvin. Not a bad CRI. So we used it, and it worked out pretty well because it was built in and we could show it. And it was real. So that worked out really well. Let's see here. And then this was a little bit later in the season. We had this flamethrower effect that the DP Baz and I talked about quite a bit. Like, how do we get this fire effect blasting in here? And he had the idea that we should take some wild LED panels from our volume stage and build them outside the windows and essentially play fire content. And so Derek was able to run a media server, and we would play back some fire content in order to get kind of the active fire vibe that we wanted, like essentially real fire that could be reflected. It worked well.
So that would be in use there, right?
Yeah, this is all video tiles in the background like that. That's we had a panel. I think it was like 4 by 12 or something outside that window behind her. And then we had another 8x8 inside.
So I think we've got a little video clip of that. So why don't we go ahead and watch that? Just bear in mind, if you want to talk over it, it will mute you, so you'll have to hit your microphone. Mike, let's go ahead and play that now.
So that's a video wall right now that Derek was controlling through a media server, correct?
Oh, wow.
So we need to get their guns, please. I never thought I'd be sitting here cheering KC. Feel wrong.
Wow, Jeff, that really worked really, really well.
Yeah, it was great. It was nice because we could kind of pick. We were able to pick the content we wanted, so we kind of ran through a bunch of different options and found what worked best. And I think we ended up with something pretty good.
No, it looks good. Now, where do you get that content? And Derek, I mean, how are you running? You were running that through like an inbox or something?
Yeah, so we ran Unbox on the show. Over the years, just kind of compiled it. This is just from a personal library. I think some other programmers watching this might even recognize that fire. But yeah, I just have a large library of explosion and fire. Actually, now that I'm thinking of it, ILM did give me a folder of actual explosion footage they had shot that they used in some of their in some of the movies and stuff. So I don't actually think we chose one of those, but that is part of our library. I think that one was just a generic, fire.
Well, while Jeff's looking for the next slide in the keynote, now you guys have a number of elements then throughout the series where fire was used. Now, obviously you're using those video walls in the public house set, but there's the scene, I believe, in episode 7 where they're out sort of in the campfire area outside of NEVARRO. Were you guys using LEDs in that situation as well? I mean, LED wall?
No, that one is actually, we used DS. I don't know if Jeff, we have a pretty cool picture of it.
Am I showing the slideshow right now?
Just show it.
Yeah, it's up now.
There you go.
Okay, cool. Let's see. What were we looking for?
No, this was all. We can stick back on the public house. I think I was just trying to vamp while you guys were pulling that back up.
Yeah,
just talking about the fire, the use of fire in that space, and just kind of. So there you have your DS6s that you're using for top lights.
Yeah.
In the background. That's to the right there. I'm assuming that's your beam box. That's
the beam box. Yeah, and then we had the fire that could drop in when we needed to for that scene.
Gotcha.
And then we had the interior flames.
Yeah. Great.
What is Lane doing, just hanging out in all the shots there?
I don't know. He's contemplating. Manpower and stuff.
World domination.
Typical best boy.
Well, this is one of my absolute favorite parts of the series. I really like this episode for just a number of reasons. I can't believe it's Bill Burr. I mean, of all the casting choices, I love Bill to death, and the fact that they picked him for this is fantastic. So I can't wait to dig into this, and I think there'll definitely be some conversation with Phil here, right? I mean, it's another big spaceship, bud.
Yeah, I believe actually Sam took over on this particular episode.
Yeah, this was right at the end of the season. It was last minute and get it done. I think we had 2 days to put it in completely. Construction was still building 2 days before we shot. So it was definitely a big push. I think I ended up doing 36 hours straight on this, pretty much. So yeah, it wasn't a whole lot of fun, but we got it done. It did work really well. The hallways were a lot more of the rigging team than a lot of the smaller pills along the side walls were was it DS3s, Jeff, that were behind each one of those pills?
Yeah, those were. I think there were two DS modules behind each pill.
Okay, well there you go, 2 DS modules then. Yeah, we think there was probably like I think it was 15, 20 of those little button panels for each one of the cells, and then there was a whole control room. Yeah, mainly what we did was the small pill lights that actually are off right now from the overheads, and then all the button panels. So, and I think we just used hybrid in those the pills on top.
Yeah, we decided we weren't going to go full color just because the rest of everything could go full color, and we'll keep those white. So it worked out well. I mean, it was nice because the DS and strobe really well, and it was a tough set to work in for sure. I mean, anyone that's worked in an all red set, tensions run high, and especially when there's white strobes going on too. I mean, it was long days in red light with white strobes. I mean, it was not a comfortable set to be in. So essentially, every time we cut, we'd have to stop the strobes, and people were not happy.
Take a little breather.
Yeah.
Yeah, there it is, nice, clean and white.
Yeah.
So here, Sam, the pills, what you're calling the pills in that image there are the ones that are up in the ceiling panels, right? And so the walls, just to be clear, are all DS3s.
Yes, sir. That's correct.
Right.
And then I believe they had DS6s above each one of the grates. Is that correct, Jeff?
Yeah, I think we did like one or two above each one.
Yeah.
And then we would carry, that's one of our lighting technicians, Joey Kennedy on the left. He would walk around with this DS1 flashing unit to kind of add to the flashes, which was actually a tough deal because we were trying to run wireless, and I forget, Derek, how many frames were these flashes, the duration of those flashes?
Oh, yeah.
It was so fast that like we had to kind of, we eventually hardwired it because even if it was like delayed by like 2 frames, you could tell that it wasn't flashing at the exact same time. So that was a project, but I think it worked out pretty well.
How much total hallway for this particular set was built? I mean, was it like T-shaped or what shape, and how much was there for you guys to utilize?
Do you have that layout?
Oh, I do. Yeah. Let's see. There's the homies.
That's the crew. Look at them boys.
Let's see here. There's the layout.
Oh, wow.
So we had, let's see. Derek can explain it better, but essentially that's the control room on the left. Then we had a T hallway, and then an end cap on each of those on the west and the east. And then on the north end, it was just a green screen.
Wow, that's a great diagram.
Yeah, Derek and our programming team
There you
do a
go.
great job putting all these maps together for Jeff to make all of this make sense.
Yeah,
that
was awesome.
How many days did you
Yeah,
shoot
we
on
had
the
a
set?
fixed account.
Well, I don't know. What did we shoot there? A week, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah.
Close
Hard
to
to
a
remember.
week.
Yeah.
A couple days in the control room and a couple days in the hallways.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's a great looking set. Very clean.
And then we had
Nice
the
floor.
party mode, of course. Why not?
Yeah. It's always good for ramp.
Bauman knows.
Oh yeah.
We had some
That's-
good party modes on this season for sure.
Yep. Hey, we started doing those on another Favreau job back on Iron Man, so I'm glad to see the tradition continuing.
Yeah.
We'll talk about the Dune Sea a bit and kind of what that whole thing was. It's kind of an interesting environment.
Yeah, this was actually, we shot this in the same stage we shot NEVARRO, the NEVARRO Street night exterior. So we utilized that overhead DS box a lot, and Baz had a great time in here because we would just sit there, essentially we would turn everything off and just slowly bring on little pieces because the sand would just light up so much, and he did not want it to feel like lit, like it was a classic night, with a big, HMI backlight. Like we didn't want that vibe. We wanted it to feel more ambient. So, we turn on a couple DSs over there, a couple DSs over here, just to kind of get some glints in his armor and kind of just build this general ambience. And then I think we keyed with some some sort of softbox and a scissor lift from the camera right side on that shot. Yeah, it was essentially a big, wide open, sandy area with a blue screen. Was the general vibe, and then same idea for this speeder bike chase. Essentially the same idea. We had some cues on this one where there was a flare, which was really cool. So let's see, yeah, for this shot, we had let's see, I think I have the photo here. Yeah, so we had a big softbox on the left. I had a DS beam on a scissor lift that was doing the actual flaring, and then just another wrappy light on the right side. So this was always fun because we had pretty precise measurements and everything we had to match, because we would essentially race them at separate times. Even though they were riding together, we'd shoot them separately. So all the camera angles had to match, and they did a great job with all the tech viz and everything.
Oh yeah, so there you've got a beam mounted with a theater. Is that a theater behind it, or a 3000?
That's a theater. Yeah, it's kind of a weird rig, just because we had the theater up there first, and then it was kind of a throw that beam up there, and we got to get this effect. So we threw that in there, and it worked great. So on this stage, we had that, obviously that overhead softbox is just getting slowly destroyed as the season goes on. But we had movers mounted on these little truss pieces all the way around, so I'd use them for either hitting the talent, or I would actually use a lot of them to light the bambulas on the ground. So I'd just make them blue, and we'd help out the blue screen with those movers, which I really liked.
Yeah.
Yeah, great setup.
So yeah, again, I think a lot of people view this show as the volume show, but we did a lot of blue screen. It was not, because you can only build so many sets inside of the volume at a certain time. So whenever they were building, we would be shooting blue screen. So a good majority of it is blue screen.
And I think now is one of those times where we should just make sure the audience knows we will be talking about the volume. So this is one of those typical TV show teases, right, where we're keeping the volume for the last thing of the broadcast. But don't worry, we're going to get there.
Well, you got one of the most classic sets in Star Wars lore with the cantina. That's always that must have been kind of fun, shooting in something that had so much history.
Oh yeah, this was fun. This was Baz was pretty pumped about this one. So was I, because it was like, you're when you stepped onto that set, you were there, So it was kind of nice to kind of feel that vibe again. And but I think we still kept it within the language of the show. Like I think we tried to keep it close to what the original was, but it definitely has more of a Mandalorian vibe in here than I think A New Hope. Which I think is great. Baz did a wonderful job in here.
This one was a pain in my butt.
That's
It wasn't a whole
please.
lot. It wasn't a whole lot, but because of budgetary purposes, I had a set going on at the back lot as well, so I had to put guys out at the back lot, which second unit was shooting there. So, and obviously sets were coming in and out and shifting very rapidly. So I had two guys out there, and then I was just going hard on this set pretty much by myself. And then they wanted a bunch of little specialty lights inside these containers and stuff. But that was just because of the amount of stuff they were throwing at us at that point in time, and it's just not enough manpower.
So it goes.
But it was definitely a pain in the butt.
Hey, there we go. Little LG shot at that. Looked like some light tile then that was going to be your overhead box then for the main bar, right?
Yeah, I think we had 10 2x8s up there through Magic Cloth, and then this is. I think we ended up adding some little teasers in there, but this was a general, before shot. I don't think I got an after one, but this is the layout that Derek built.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right, let's keep going.
Yeah. That's good.
This set was awesome. This was one of those concept. We had some good concept art for this one. This was earlier on, so Phil was with me. Mm-hmm. And Greg and I worked on this one. I think we spent a good little while in here. Like, this is all DSs. I think we had a DS6 through each of those holes on the right side. And then I think we had a DS6 softbox over the stairs on the left. But he wanted to keep it real dark. Like, he wanted this to be, I mean, this is not exactly the Armorer's Workshop. This is the tunnel on the way. This is like the sewer tunnels on the way, but I just clumped it in there. So this was cool. We had the Phil had all these little pixel rings. I'm sure you could talk about those, Phil. What were those that we used for those flames?
Those were the Adafruit NeoPixel rings. I think we had the 12 diode version. They come in various sizes, and yeah, we just run a little fire effect through the through where the burners are.
Yeah, that worked out well. We
You
had
can augment from below with DSs as well, Jeff.
yeah, I think we had a couple DS3 kits underneath as like a more of a fire, like molten fire effect. And then around, I don't know if there's a photo of it in a little bit, but there's a little ring around the outside that we had tubes in. I think we did have Voyager tubes in there for a good part of the show. They did all right. And then we had tungsten, which was one of the only sets we had true tungsten on.
Yeah.
For those little jelly jars. And overhead there was I think it was full grid with I think 3 DS6s overhead coming down, giving a little ambience. And then we just would augment. Essentially, we would play off of those jelly jars quite a bit for the warm kicks. And then just obviously we see Mando has a little eye light type scenario. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of great details. I mean,
Little prop,
it
little
is
wireless
interesting
prop that y'all built.
yeah,
Oh yeah, that
it was interesting what you're talking about, just how you're bringing character into people that are basically just a mask the entire time, and use of light and that. That's something you're not going to see every day.
Oh yeah, not lighting a face, you're lighting metal. But I think it's great. To be honest, I love that helmet. Like lighting up Mando is such a treat. Like he looks so good when you hit him at that right angle. Like even right there, just that little warm kick on his helmet and on that. I mean,
yeah,
it accented really nice there. Yeah. So that's just a photo of kind of the general vibe off of without a real camera pointed at it. And then there's the ring that goes around the base. So forget, did we have ribbon in there to start and then we swapped it out, or was it always tubes? I can't remember.
There's ribbon on the top.
Yeah,
ribbon up top. Yeah.
Chimney flue was a Cine 6.
It's interesting. I mean, again, this all go back to a bit of the concept art, which is what I believe they're playing in the end credits of each one of the episodes. And the armorer's area, from the concept art to what you guys built and what they shot, was the most identical out of any of the concept art that I had seen throughout the course of the series. It's impressive. I mean, what was that workflow like from you guys getting concept art and then working with set deck and the art department and then actually implementation? Like, how did that go?
Well, I mean, again, I think this first season, they weren't, distributing concept art just like willy-nilly. It was very under wraps because they didn't want anyone knowing about it. So it was definitely hard to get the concept art. But Phil and I, we talked about this, and he worked pretty closely with set deck on building in a lot of these little features. And then Greg and I we just looked at the art, and then we walked into the set because the set was already being built. And then we just would talk extensively about how do we get light in here. It's literally a small dome. It wasn't very big, and we wiled a couple walls, but we mostly just shot in there with the door, that main access door, and we would just roll around in there. So I don't know. That was a fun set. I love shooting in there. I mean, we shot in there a ton. Like, I mean, we had the armorer's fight at the end. We had the beginning where she builds his signet, and the little chest with the tools in it. I mean, there were so many little pieces in there that we just kind of slowly built on as we got going. It wasn't just like, here's exactly what we're going to do. It was kind of like, all right, we got the jelly jars, which was mostly a set deck fill scenario. The flue, I think, was, Phil and me and you talked about that, if we could fit something up there.
Yeah, I don't even believe that was in the original plans to put a light up there. We just kind of found a space for it.
Yeah, yeah. So again, it's pretty organic. I mean, there wasn't like a set protocol or anything. I think it was like here's the art. Let's kind of try to get a similar vibe, because it's the concept art that Doug does. I mean, it's gorgeous. And so you're like, man, if we could get even close to something like this, like we'll win, you know?
That's great. We'll talk about this one.
Let's see. This was on the back lot. Let's see. This was at the beginning. This was, yeah, Greg was still shooting. This was a fun set just because we knew this was like the end of episode 1, and everyone's going to be hooked. And this is the first time you see the child. So we spent a good chunk of time making sure this shot right here looked good. You know, that was a note, like backlighting the baby the baby has to look good. So I think we actually came back and shot this shot later to kind of make sure we got it right. But essentially, we had a couple LRXs on condors. We had the luck of some sun. I think that's why this was actually real sun we got lucky with.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean, this was a concept art right here. So we made sure that this was going to look good. We blasted an 18K through that doorway, and then did a little silhouette. I thought it looked, this shot actually matched pretty well to the concept art. There's Dave Filoni, Greg, Fraser, and Baz.
Operating.
Yeah, baby.
Well done.
Classic shot.
Good one.
Yeah, that's an American cinematography shot right there if I've ever seen one.
Yeah. So yeah, they built they had a bunch of these little slats above, so we could have some rays coming in. There's the Beast and an LRX we used because it was, I don't know, was it supposed to rain or something like that? I forget why we didn't use just a regular. I think it was just because we were going to be pointed almost straight down. We wanted to have remote control of that light. So we used those LRXs, which are great. I really like those.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Looks like rain.
Looks like rain. Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go. It's a lot of weight on the front of that condor. Nice.
Yeah, baby. Unmanned.
Yeah.
Razor Crest. Again, this was we had talked about not making this look like Star Trek or anything too clean. We wanted it to be kind of dirty. So we went with kind of a dirty tungsten vibe in here. Everything was individually controllable. Each of these little pars were real tungsten on the left and the right. We had the little gun rack on the right. We lit up. Phil did a nice job on that. But yeah, to be honest, this whole set was mostly lit by the practicals. We would obviously augment a little bit, but there's these little bar lights you can see in the top that are all Cine 6 and quite bright, so we could kind of individually control those depending on what kind of shape we wanted. But yeah, that's a good shot of generally what it looks like in there with all the lights on.
Those floor lights, Phil. You love those, don't you?
Yeah, the two strips in the floor were an afterthought. They actually installed them after we finished building the rest of that ship, and they were plagued with problems for a while, and then I believe they got rained on once, which didn't help it.
I had to change them out 4 times. The last day of shooting, they had a wide shot just like this, and half of them were not quite working. So the very last day, I had to go in and change them out for the last day of shooting. The UPM loved it.
Oh, yeah.
You have to change all this stuff out now?
Oh, that's a great plot.
Yeah, it's some more Tom Howard's fine work.
Yeah, Tom.
He's the star.
Yeah.
So each button panel had its own little key, and you could obviously see what every individual button was doing. which I think goes unnoticed most of the time, but it is a lot of work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Tom hand drew almost every one of those panels. The amount of work that Tom did is unbelievable.
Yeah.
Yes, he is truly my other half, or maybe my other 2/3.
Yeah. We're in the cockpit now. I think I just clumped them together. So again, same idea. Lots of individual fixtures. We slowly added as we went along, but mostly we tried to reduce the amount of blue. I think that was one thing that we started off with a lot of blue in that cockpit, and it just didn't quite feel right. You know, mixing with the red kind of gave you this like magenta glow. So I think we almost turned off every single blue light in that cockpit, except for a couple. And yeah, so we would obviously change a little bit of the color depending on the scene. This was a little bit later in the show, but essentially we would light with like a HMI. Actually, this is one of the only HMIs we used on stage. I think it was a 1200 Fresnel, some old school light that we used, which actually worked out really great.
That's awesome.
And we had it on a little crane, and we would use it just kind of slowly moving around. It was operated and by Andrew McIntosh right there. He's operating our little Johnny. And there's Derek.
There we go.
Yep.
Here's that
He's
smiling face.
probably setting some levels on those buttons.
Yeah, she threw up right after this.
Yeah.
So what are we looking at here? What's this plot of? Are these the control panels?
Yeah, so that's what I see on my screen, digital representation of the cockpit. So Jeff does have little mini plots, cheat sheets, if he wants to give me the actual fixture number. But a lot of times he would just kind of, I mean, to be honest, we didn't adjust these too much. But this kind of allowed me to have a better a representation of what's going on in the cockpit if I didn't have a chance to hop in there myself with the tablet. So, and if, you know, sometimes I'll be pretty much in every shot in the background, I'm looking at the frame, and if there's some buttons that are a little too bright, or maybe there's like a blinky light like right next to the child's head that looks a little off, you know, I might make an adjustment on that. So this will just help me with that a lot, be able to find it.
And then on the buttons, I mean, since those are real buttons, when the talent is pushing that button, are you having to cue whether the light is going on or off, or is that secondarily tied into the button actually functioning?
We wired them to where they would just function tactile. So you could just push them. I don't know how that worked out with you guys in continuity, but
it we did is going back to the Dave Filoni. Actually, early on in the show I asked him, I said, "What's can you right now? Let's determine the startup sequence for Razor Crest." You know, so Dave, we decided like which buttons in which order would be the proper way for Mando to start the ship. And in that case, like Phil said, since all the switches or buttons are actually, you know, open close switches, I just leave those specific buttons on, and then we go through and physically turn them off. And then so Mando sat down and flipped everything, the buttons would come on at any time. So if the actor ever wanted to interact with a button that was on, if they hit it, it would turn off. But then we would have to make sure to have someone go in and button again if we needed to for continuity, like you said, if we're doing the whole startup sequence over and over.
Sure. Cool.
Well, I think we've come to a part that everyone loves to talk about, which is the volume. Bum, 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 bum. We need some theme music.
All right. Woo. So pretty.
I'll just, my 2 cents on it was, when I did the initial test for this thing, it was like, wow, this is going to be a deal. And to see how far you guys have evolved with this is amazing. And clearly it's setting the bar for what can be done. Yeah. So talk a bit. It's a 2.8 video wall, 2.8 millimeter. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's a 2.8 RGB panel. We had on the walls was 2.8 actually. On the ceiling we had a 5 mil outdoor panel. Essentially it was just a outdoor panel that we couldn't source enough, so we went with outdoor panel, which actually was nice because we had a lot of output out of the ceiling and less out of the walls. But it actually worked out well, and I think with the color, we did it takes some tweaking in order to get the color right. So we did some extensive testing, and Baz and the color scientists and everything did a great job building the LUT, and kind of making the video wall work with the camera was they did a wonderful job with that. And so yeah, anyways, this is just the general rig. I don't want to go too deep into this, just because they are going to talk about it on the gallery, on the Star Wars gallery. But I just kind of want to talk a little bit about like my side of it, without going too far into like the big scope of it, if you know what I mean.
No, but actually, could you go back to that previous slide? Because I had a question. Because I know when we did the initial test, it was like the amount of weight, especially at that, obviously wasn't something that could be supported from. So you guys clearly had to really do some engineering, because this was not like what we used on the test at all.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The riggers did an incredible job. I mean, the amount of weight that we essentially we couldn't even support it from the ceiling. We had to mount it. It was ground based. At a certain point, at least the ceiling was, and then the walls were all obviously ground based. But I mean, it was massive, and it looked great. I mean, anywhere where you're standing in the volume, you don't see off, so it's all pretty much a clean seam. And we had a deck that went around that we could light from. So essentially, we could pop holes out of the volume in order to put our own lights through, which we did a lot, because I think with lighting in the volume, for me, you're getting soft light because you're building a source with with LEDs that are almost 180 degree spread. So I would oftentimes augment with my own lights. So we'd put the beast or the beam through the top holes, and sometimes we take out a big section, sometimes we'd only take out a few panels, but we did have that option. And then I think this was the catwalk up top. So there were some positions we could open up the ceiling, and we could drop truss and motors through in order to hang a grid, or essentially light from within the volume with our own set lights, because you can only do so much with a white square on a ceiling, because it does spread everywhere and it's not really controlled. But yeah, they did. I mean, look at this thing. This thing's a work of art.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
Yeah.
Ooh.
That's a great.
Yeah. So here's a good example of how we would light. We puzzed out a hole, and then we'd sometimes just put a beam. I think I sometimes had two beams and a beast going through like one 4x12 hole, just to kind of get the output we needed.
So what we're seeing here, Jeff, is you're on the deck that's elevated, and you've got the top of a section of the wall right here with just the beast pushing light through. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So like that hole right there, essentially.
That's a great picture.
It was like little meerkats
behind them. Essentially, we would just use that as a access point, our own little green bed. And then let's see.
Floater walls.
Yeah, so we would often do like augmented video tiles for if we weren't shooting in the volume. This is just included in the video wall stuff. So we would run content through them, and then essentially we could make our own little mini volume outside of the volume to get interactive lighting. Yeah. So I don't know if that's So these were some walls we used. I forget what set this was for, Derek. Was this for the lava tunnel?
I think so. Yeah, for lava.
Yeah. So that was kind of a cool use of that stuff. But in terms of volume stuff, I mean again, I don't want to go into too much detail, but I think for me, in terms of my side of it, the volume is a great tool, and I have like my own control surface that I can use to add a source onto the wall that I have, whether it's a square or a circle, and I can manipulate that color temperature. I can manipulate the size. I can kind of tweak it more than you could with like a grip frame. You can add negative just by making the screen darker or brighter if you want. So yeah, it's a great tool. I think obviously you can't do everything in there, but we used it extensively, especially for like the dusk scenes where there wasn't the hard light. I mean, it was amazing. Like the realism that you got in Mando's helmet, and just like the overall shape of lighting, it just feels correct because you're almost exactly in that space. So we could do a dusk scene all day. We could do a sunset. We can go to lunch and come back and still shoot the sunset type of thing. So I mean, it has its advantages, but I think again, we still need to add our own set lights in there. And I think that's maybe a misconception that people have. Is like, oh, you just throw people in there and put content up and it looks good. It's like, well, no, you still have to tweak it. We still tweak the color. We still add our own sources and stuff like that.
But I think that because there's been some questions pop up, Derek, you didn't have any control whatsoever of the wall, right? From a set lighting standpoint. I mean, it sounds like, Jeff had some ability to bring some light cards in and do some stuff, but as far as the wall lighting and the console lighting, there was no real integration between the two, was there?
No. Well, so the video, ILM was responsible for the content in the volume. When you see the shots of the fire in the public house or the video wall on the Petty Bones, that was being controlled by set lighting. But if it was in the volume, doing the live rendered content with that advanced system you guys will hear all about on the gallery show, that I didn't have interaction with, but I was taking in all that content. So if at any point Jeff said, hey, see that, like an example from the show, we had the fence of the blurg pen. At the top of each fence post was a blinking light. And you can see is a virtual fence that you see on the volume on camera. But we actually had a physical fence that art department built that we had fixtures on the top of that fence. And so in order to sync the blinking of the virtual fence with the physical fence on set, we actually pixel mapped the content from ILM onto our fixtures. So I don't have interaction with the volume, but I am receiving all of their content. So if we wanted to manipulate it or use it to control some of our floor lights.
Very cool. And then
Jeff,
I'm sorry, Mike, go ahead.
I was going to ask Jeff, just like talk a bit about like setting light levels and metering inside the volume, and how that transferred. Because you guys were shooting at what ASA were you shooting at? 800 in there?
Yeah, we were at 800, and we tried to keep it, not wide open, but we were anywhere from like a 2.8 to a 4 usually. I know we had plenty of light. I mean, light was never the problem. We had so much light in that space. I think it was mostly, we had rules where you don't focus on the wall just for moire and stuff like that.
Sure.
And in terms of intensity of light, we had plenty. And usually it was like I would be in charge of adding negative. Like I was essentially like no one else had the iPad except for ILM guys. So I usually took that and I would do my lighting on that. So they would have separate control of everything in terms of the general overall color, that type of any sort of content related stuff. I was more the next level of adding a source that was just a shape on the wall. And so I could adjust that intensity in Kelvin, full hue saturation control, size and shape. So sometimes, it'd be great. I'd be like, oh, sweet. I could add a 100 by 100, 50% opacity black card on the ceiling and move it down. And then that would create our negative. Instead of bringing in a 12 by frame or something, you could just do it on the wall. And adding, a lot of times I'd add like a little strip of light kind of near the top of the wall as a little back edge, just out of frame. For me, the interesting part and why we used a lot of the sources coming from the top of the wall was if you bring a source from the wall onto the ceiling, that's now pointed straight down. So now when you're now lighting straight down, you're washing the wall, you're revealing that there are black gaps between the pixels, and you're now washing the wall. So then you start losing that realism a little bit. So that was obviously we had to take that into consideration quite a bit, was how much my lights were lighting the wall itself. So oftentimes we'd have a lot of egg crates on my lights, or just trying to take down the brightness of the ceiling enough so that we were keeping that part of the wall at a correct illumination that looked real on camera and it wasn't washing out. I don't know if I answered your question, but that.
Yeah, no, I was curious. And then what did you guys generally put the white point on the camera at?
We were almost daylight. We were daylight balanced the whole show, essentially. I think we tweaked a couple times if the scene called for it, but I don't think we ever went full 3200s. So I think sometimes we went to mid 4000s.
Gotcha.
But most the white point on the panels is D65. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's great stuff. I mean, it's a really impressive environment to be in, and also this whole presentation just underscored how much else was going on outside of the volume, because that's all really where all the talk has been, is on the volume. But you guys have really had a lot of other things going on, which are all great.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting on our side of things and fixtures too, because everything had to be digitally, like any physical fixtures that we would put into the volume, they would also digitally map and put them on the walls as well. So we would have to build lights in advance so that they could photogrammetry them and then build them into the sets, into the walls, which was very interesting. It was new to me.
Yeah,
Wow.
That one was a little tricky. The other thing that was really tricky was when you're working off production inside the volume and they start spinning the world on you when you're standing there.
That'll throw you off.
Yeah. Sometimes you feel like you're going to fall down.
So there's no warning. There's no we're going live. Nothing, huh? They just let it go.
No.
Oh no,
They'll
they're
start
just playing
spinning the
around.
world on you.
That might have been done on purpose. I'm just saying.
Probably.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah. But that was another thing, was what Sam brought up, was putting like the real pictures into the world, so that sometimes set deck would mount like an actual fixture on a post or on the ground. We'd have a little like landing light that we would have for real, and then in the background they would still continue on. So we had to make sure the intensity matched and the color matched. So that was actually a cool part of it, because eventually we can get the adjustability of color on the wall, but usually we had to match to whatever was on the wall because it was mostly baked in.
And what was that color? I mean, did it have a tendency to lean more green? Did it lean more magenta? I mean, how were you dealing with what the color was coming off?
I guess it just depends. Sometimes with like a blue sky, it would shift a little magenta. And then sometimes if it was just like a gray, like more of a gray sky, it would tend a little green. But they had full adjustability of that. So if it fell off the truck a certain way, we could just slightly tweak it out. And then matching my lights to the color of the wall is different, just because of the spikiness of the walls versus the full spectrum of my lights. They would look different on set. And so obviously DS is not full spectrum, but we would sometimes use sky panels in there and whatnot. But the DSs work great in there because you could shift, we would shift a little bit. I think we shifted mostly a little bit magenta in there because they came off a touch green. But that's what's so great about those lights, is you can just tweak it. Add a little bit more, add a little more, add a little more, instead of just swapping gels out all day.
That's great.
Fantastic. Well, I think this is a great opportunity to bring this fantastic conversation to a close. I got to tell you, this has been a phenomenal Like Your Live, you guys. I really appreciate it. You've now set the official length record for Like Your Live in episode 4. So congratulations on that. But that's been amazing content. I really appreciate all the time that you guys have given to talking about this show. It's clear that you guys are passionate about the work that you're doing, and it shows up on every episode. I mean, for those of you watching out there, if you haven't had a chance to go through all 8 episodes, it's very entertaining. It's very, very well put together, and this team has done an amazing job, and I really appreciate your time today, everybody. So with that, I will sign off with a couple things. There are some people asking, and I'll reiterate. So on Disney Plus, there is Disney Gallery, which is a docuseries on the making of Mandalorian. The first episode did air this past Monday. That can be seen now on Disney Plus, and there will be a second episode debuting, I believe, either this Friday or next Monday. So there's a total of 8 episodes as well. So be sure to tune into those. So next week, we are continuing the Like Your Life series with episode 5, where we will be sitting down with the team behind Avengers Endgame and Avengers Infinity War. So please tune in to see Jeff Morrell, programmer Scotty Barnes, and fixtures designer Mike Vicenzio talk about shooting concurrent movies over the course of almost 2 straight years. So should be a great episode of Like Your Life. So with that, again, I want to thank Jeff Webster. I want to thank Bobby DeChellis, Derek Hoffman, Sam Kemp, and Phil Abeda from the CIA Black Site. My co-host, Mr. Mike Bauman. Thank you, Mr. Mike Wagner, running things in behind the scenes. You guys have been awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
All right, guys.
My pleasure.
Take care.
All right, guys.
Bye.
Catch you next time.
All right. Yeah.
Bye bye.
Bye.